Hey guys, it's Dr. May. Hope everything's good with you. I know it's been a little while since I made some videos. I've been involved in some trainings to enhance my own psychological knowledge. And I was trying to think of something good to share with you. And I came across in my files a DBT expanded manual by a guy named Pederson. And I was looking through it and I said, there's some extra skills in there that are beyond what the usual DBT offers. And some of them are pretty good, some new acronyms, some new ideas. And so I'm putting together some PowerPoints so I could share these new skills with you. So in addition to the original DBT videos I have, these are going to be expanded edition videos that are going to be in a separate playlist. So you could get to know these skills as well. So today I'm going to get to the very first one, which has to do with dialectics. And this is the D in DBT that we all know and love. So we're going to call this one Be Flexible and Dialectical with middle C's. So any piano players and musicians out there might understand the metaphor here about a middle C. So if you look at this picture, the guy in the piano is striking the key that's considered middle C. So it's kind of in the very middle of the piano. And when you first learn to play, you start with middle C and the notes that surround it. So this is literally like a whole view of a piano keyboard and where it's located. So it's approximately in the middle. And when we're in emotional mind, we tend to be at extreme ends of the piano. So like the very low notes or maybe the very high notes or flip-flopping back and forth. And we have a hard time getting to the middle notes of the piano or the middle level of emotions, the kind of moderate ways of thinking and behaving and interacting. And for a lot of situations in life, it's more advantageous to be somewhere in the middle. There's still times when we might need extremes, but it's good to have the whole piano available to us and not just a couple of keys on the ends. So if you take that metaphor in mind, we're going to use this as we discuss these middle C's. And each letter of that phrase is going to stand for something, and it's going to help us get to the middle. Okay. So obviously in DBT speak, this is associated with wise mind. It's associated with thinking flexibly, dialectically, with mental health, with, resilience and all that good stuff. So that's some good reasons to check this one out. Okay. So the M of middle C's stands for being mindful of black and white. And I thought it's kind of interesting because the piano keys themselves are also black and white, right? Though interesting. So we're going to be mindful, like just check in with ourselves in the moment and say, wait a minute, am I feeling in extreme ways? Am I thinking extreme? Am I behaving extreme? Am I interpersonal interactions extreme? Am I in that black and white mode? So that's what we have to figure out first before we do anything else. So I'm going to give some examples of things we might notice in ourselves that give us the clue that we're in black and white mode. Okay, so emotions, intense emotions. So are my emotions really amped up, like a 10 out of 10 or a 12 out of 10 or 100 out of 10? So things like fear, anger, depression, hopelessness, shame, are they really intense right now? Do I have a strong sense of urgency? Ever get that feeling like I got to do it right now, or, hurry up, we got to do it. It's an emergency. Okay. So that's a sense that my emotions might be really intense. Or on the flip side, the other side of the piano, are my emotions completely shut off? Am I feeling like really numb or shut down or just like dead inside? So that's another extreme. So sometimes our emotions might be really high and intense, hyper aroused. Other times it might be really low and hypo aroused. Okay. And another clue is that if I really think about it, are my emotions out of proportion for this situation? Am I getting way, way more activated, way more angry, way more fearful than is actually necessary for this particular situation? Okay, so we got some clues if my emotions are intense. So if our emotions are intense, chances are our thinking is also very black and white as well. Okay, because in emergency situations, we need to think black and white. Okay, are you for me or against me? Are you my enemy or are you my friend? Can I trust you or I can't trust you? Just let me know. I don't want to make a mistake. Okay, this is an emergency. So our thinking has to be black and white in emergency situations. But if our emotions are too extreme for a situation and our thoughts are too extreme for a situation, it may not be a good fit. Okay, so questions to ask ourselves. Am I thinking extreme thoughts? Rigidity is another component. Am I rigidly holding on to my point of view or insisting I'm right? Or insisting just because I'm thinking this, it has to be true. If I think that you don't like me, you must not like me. Or if I think I'm a bad person, maybe I'm just a bad person. Okay, am I taking my thoughts to be the truth? Am I taking things too personally? He looked at me funny. I'm sure it's because he doesn't like me. He must have been doing that because it's me, right? Is something wrong with me? Okay, I'm personalizing something that may not be personal at all. The guy might have just been staring into space and I'm taking it like it's about me. All right, sometimes things are about me, but not always about me. Okay. Am I exaggerating or being judgmental? So as we know from the mindfulness house skills, non-judgmentally is a house skill. When I'm judgmental, it amps up my emotions. The more I think this is ridiculous, this is stupid, I can't stand this guy's a jerk, it makes my emotions more and more intense. So if I'm starting to think these really judgmental things, that's a kind of an extreme black and white thinking style. Okay. Other little clues. Am I using words such as always or never? He's always giving me a hard time. He never listens to me. What about should or must? It should be this way. It shouldn't be this way. Why must this happen? Best and worst. Oh, this is the worst meal I ever had. This is the worst restaurant. This is the worst doctor I ever had. Okay. Oh, he's the best guy I ever dated. Okay, so very extreme stuff. Either or. Again, either you're for me or you're against me. Either this is going to work out or I'm quitting. So there's no middle ground. It's very extreme. It's not a both and like dialectical thinking. It's an either or, one or the other. Okay. Sound familiar, guys? Maybe a little, right? Okay. Behaviors. So naturally, our thinking and feeling eventually translates into behaviors. So I picked this picture of a guy who's sitting on a bull at a china shop. So I don't know about you, but when I'm getting kind of extreme, my behaviors feel like I'm like a bull in a china shop. So when you're in a china shop, there's a lot of breakable things. So it's important to walk carefully and mindfully and don't touch too many things and watch where you're walking so you don't knock stuff over and make a mess. But when you're really emotional, you're just not even paying attention to the context. You're just blowing through stuff and breaking stuff and leaving a trail of destruction in your wake. And sometimes that's a sign that you're very extreme. So some questions to ask ourselves. We can call them self-inquiry questions as we do in Radically Open DBT, if you like. All right, so are my behaviors driven by my impulses or my emotional mind? Okay, so maybe I'm not thinking things through as carefully as I could. I'm kind of acting on impulse. I'm having that urgency that's making me do it right away, doing the first thing that comes to my mind and not really planning it out carefully. Am I shifting back and forth between extreme options? Okay, what about if things don't work out for me, I might as well just kill myself. That's a pretty extreme option, right? Either it's great or I'm dead. Am I between going in all the way versus giving up? I'm going to work on this project to the end and complete it and make it perfect, or I'm just going to forget about this whole thing. Next, am I choosing to behave or threatening to behave in a way that might be too extreme for this particular situation? So there's a time and place for everything, but maybe this isn't the right time and place for something extreme. So for example, if I have an argument with a coworker, am I ready to just quit my job? If I have a rough spot with the person I'm dating, am I ready to just leave this relationship and call it off? Either we're getting along great or I'm leaving. Or if, things aren't going well, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to engage in some kind of a target behavior. And that might be very extreme, especially for certain situations. All right, so hope we got some clues here. I gave a lot of examples. Oh, I'm sorry, one more, relationships. So a lot of time this black and white extreme stuff plays out in our relationships. So here are some examples that you might be able to relate to. All right, trusting completely or blindly versus not trusting at all. All right, if I meet somebody and I'm telling them my whole life story and, I think this is going to be great and perfect because I got a little clue that you like me, versus I don't trust anybody. I'm not telling you nothing. I'm not getting close to anybody. I'm putting up walls. All right. Demanding perfection from myself or others. So am I not only demanding that I be perfect, but demanding that others be perfect? And if not, it feels dangerous in some way. Engaging in intense conflicts versus avoiding conflicts. Either we're arguing and having conflicts all the time, and it's very conflictual and very chaotic, or I'm putting up walls and I'm just stonewalling and I'm avoiding. And instead of talking things through, I'm just ignoring it. Next one, people pleasing. Sound familiar? Ignoring my own needs and being a doormat. So am I letting people walk all over me and not expressing my needs at all, putting other people first all the time and resenting it because I'm not able to have a voice, or I don't even know what my voice is? Being overly dependent versus being overly independent. So I'm either very needy and clingy and dependent with somebody, or I feel like I don't need anybody. I just got this by myself. I'm not going to ask anybody for help. I'm going to do it on my own. I got this. And last one, fearing closeness. So I'm afraid of getting too close because I'm afraid of being controlled or engulfed or out of control or violated, versus fearing abandonment. So I'm very comfortable being close, but the littlest sign that the person's pulling away or they're doing something else or they're not paying attention to me, I freak out because I'm scared to death that they're going to leave me. So here's, okay, all these black and white things that could play out in relationships. So really do an inventory, like check in with yourself. Are these things going on with me? These are signs of black and white. All right, so the I, we finally made it to the second letter. Okay, identify shades of gray. So I found this diagram here, and doesn't it look a whole lot like emotional mind, reasonable mind, wise mind, like that Venn diagram with the circles? So wise mind is also kind of a gray area. It's really a compromise. It's something in the middle. It takes into account both sides. So, and it's not too extreme. It's like the center of the piano, the keys surrounding middle C, something more moderate. So how do I move from these extreme ways of feeling, thinking, acting, and being interpersonal into something a little bit more gray? So after I identify the black and white, I could start to explore, well, what might it look like if I'm more moderate in this situation? How might it be different the way I'm thinking and feeling or behaving? What would my wise mind tell me to do? Sometimes, if we just ask ourselves that question, new ideas come to the forefront. If I'm really unsure, because maybe I'm still kind of emotional or stuck in the situation, I could always talk it over with somebody that I trust, and that conversation could help to get me into a wise mind. Maybe other people could give me ideas about what the gray might look like. Or maybe I could even imagine somebody that I feel is a good role model of somebody who copes well and think, well, what might they do in this situation? What might be a moderate response that they might have? Maybe I've even observed it at some point. Okay, so here's a few examples just to clarify how we can move from black and white to gray. So I work at an inpatient facility, psychiatric facility. So this is the first one's an example from that, because I'm going to be using these handouts also inpatient. So when staff said we can't go to the vending machines, I got so angry I threw a chair. So gray, what would that look like? When staff said we can't go to the vending machines, I was disappointed, but I tried to radically accept it and did something else to pass the time. So the gray is like, it's not the end of the world. I'm disappointed. Yeah, I validate that. I understand that, but I could still get through the day. It's not like this is the worst thing ever. I have to totally explode and throw a chair and act out. All right, next example. This is more just a general example. If my boyfriend doesn't perfectly understand and validate me all the time, I'm leaving this relationship. Right? If he doesn't validate me all the time, it's not safe to be here. This is not going to work out. And I'm spinning in my mind about all the things that can mean. And I can't tolerate it. So great. I appreciate it when he understands me, but I can tolerate it when he doesn't. We can work through problems when they arise. We could also communicate more so we better understand each other. So they actually say that in a securely attached relationship, the person only gets it right 30% of the time. It's not supposed to be a perfect attunement. So 30% of the time people get it. The rest of the time there's rupture and repair. things don't go quite right, and then we repair it and we make up, and we realize we could survive some of the difficult spots in our relationship. Okay, black and white thinking. I'm not perfect, and that means I'm worthless. And if I don't get it right, if I don't do it just right, if I don't get that 100 on a test, if I don't get the promotion at my job, that means this terrible thing about me. I'm not good enough. All right, great. I can do my best and be good enough, and that can be okay. I can make mistakes and learn from them without it being the end of the world. So sometimes we have these black and white views about it because when we grew up, mistakes were a very big problem. We got, messages from our parents that this was really bad, or you're not good enough, you're not okay. And you start to think, well, if only I was perfect, then people would love me. Or if only I was perfect, I would be acceptable. I would be acceptable, and okay. So you got to revamp that. In my adult life, it's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It doesn't make me a bad person. I could learn from them, I could survive them, and I could have a new way of relating to my mistakes. All right, first D, don't get stuck. So let's look at this picture here. So the girl is stuck where she's at. She has kind of these roots that are keeping her stuck to the ground. And sometimes we feel that way, that I'm stuck in my way of being. I don't know what else to do. These are so ingrained in me. It's who I am. And I don't know how to snip these roots and take a step forward. So that's natural. So if you have very fixed ways of being, it's because at some point in your life it worked. So extreme responses can include our survival responses, such as fight, flight, freeze, fold, or shut down, and fawn, which is kind of appease and please. And if those responses worked for us at an earlier point in our life, our brain's telling us these help you survive. You better stay with them. And it's very hard to undo it. You could validate yourself. This makes sense that it's hard to get unstuck from these things. It's not impossible, but it takes some effort, and it takes awareness of your patterns and a willingness to change them. So, you got to validate, yes, that they did make sense. There's pros and cons to sticking with them now. The situations when they still might work, but there's a lot of situations where maybe they don't work. So you have to acknowledge, okay, I can't use a hammer for everything. Sometimes I need other tools. So the dialectical middle ground gray stuff is another tool. Okay, and think about how might it be adaptive in my life now if I were to use some of that gray area dialectical thinking. Okay, so just start to explore it. It can be a little, challenging, but it's a first effort toward making the change. Okay, so the next D is do allow the shifts. Okay, it takes some willingness, as we talk about in DBT, to do something different, to allow it to happen. And you can make it a small step. It doesn't have to be an extreme shift to the middle. Okay, so let's look at the pendulum. Here's another metaphor. So if there's a pendulum on a clock, there's ends where it goes all the way up, and and then the center is kind of like the middle C, the middle ground. So I could pendulate. I could try, okay, let me be mindful in this situation. Let me try something extreme, see how that goes. And let me try it again with something moderate and see how that goes. Oh, let me try another extreme. Oh, how was that? All right, let me try a moderate gray area response. Oh, how was that? Okay. So you could kind of evaluate, be your own scientist, see how it feels both ways, compare and contrast, and see if you're willing to try the middle options a little bit more. Okay, get support and feedback from people. If you have a therapist or a friend or somebody you trust, you could let them know what you're working on and talk it over and see how it's going. And, if it doesn't work out perfectly, it's okay. Just acknowledge that you tried, do the best you can, celebrate your efforts, and your willingness to try, and keep working at it. It's not going to be an immediate, perfect change. All right. So the L, live a life with options. So if you're boxed into an extreme black and white response, which is really like an automatic response that your brain and body have learned over time, it doesn't give you a lot of options. It's like the one thing that you're going to that you've been used to. All right. If I get disappointed and things don't go my way, I get extremely angry and I act out. That's my response. Boom. Okay. But if I have options, it means That could be one choice I have, but there's other choices I might have as well. So it's like going to the supermarket and let's say I'm looking for salad dressing. I may not want to get balsamic vinaigrette every time. Maybe sometimes I want Thousand Island or blue cheese or ranch or, or something else. So I like to have options. I don't want to always have to do the same thing. So instead of yelling and screaming or carrying on when I'm disappointed or upset about something, maybe now I could do option B, C, D, or E. So being in the middle ground, slowing it down, thinking about those options, talking about them with other people to explore what's possible gives you some choice. And with new choices come new outcomes. Like they say, if you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results, it's insanity. So you got to do something new to create a new result. So part of the new result might be trying a middle ground gray option. Okay, so the E, extremes rarely work. So there's a time and place for everything. Sometimes extremes are necessary. So I put a picture here about like emergency situations. So there's an ambulance, there's a cop car, sometimes things are an emergency. If I'm really in danger, I want to be able to fight back or get the heck out of there. Those responses make a lot of sense, my fight or flight. Other times, I might be in a situation where keeping my mouth shut and being very still and quiet is the best thing I could do. So shutting down makes a lot of sense. But I don't, again, want to do them all the time. There's an emergency and then there's everyday life. So everyday life, I need some additional options. And doing the extreme is not going to work well for me in the long run. It might be an immediate satisfaction, but it's going to mess with my relationships, my job, my everyday functioning. Okay, so it's important to have flexibility, and that's associated with being healthier and less drama in your life and more resilience and all that good stuff. Okay, the C's. So this is the C's that they offer in the workbook here. Bring context to conflict to create change. So what the heck does that mean? Okay, that's a whole mess of C's. It sounds a little complicated. So the context is the bigger picture of what's going on. When I'm emotional, I have tunnel vision, right? If I'm in an emergency situation, let's say I'm in the woods and there's a bear that is in the near vicinity and it could be coming after me. I only want to focus on that bear because that's the threat to my life. I don't want to be exploring the birds and the sky and the trees and the foliage. Like, I'm only interested in managing that bear and figuring out what I need to do. So when we're really emotional, we're in an emergency situation, our vision gets like tunnel vision. We're not perceiving things broadly. We're only looking at a little thing. If I think someone doesn't like me, I'm focusing my attention on what they think about me because I'm interested in monitoring that person so I could, survive in that emotional, that interpersonal situation. So again, my vision is getting very narrow. So what am I doing? I'm broadening my lens so I could see more. And when I see more, I could have better options to create change and to choose another C, something different. So let's look at the picture here. So on the left, it looks like an abstract painting. I don't know what that is, but it's kind of interesting. Then I look in the right. Oh, it's part of a fish. I didn't even know the fish was there. I just thought it was like a couple of shapes. I had no idea what that big picture was. And that's what we do sometimes too. We get so zoomed in on a small piece of what's happening that we don't see the bigger picture. And we're deciding based on that small little tunnel vision piece that we're seeing. So if we want to have a better option that makes a wise mind choice and more sense, we see a choice, we have to zoom out. So here's an example. Okay, this is an actual example, again, where I work in my hospital. So they have meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there's a cart that they bring in with trays, and everybody has a prescribed meal based on their physiological needs, if they have diabetes, if they're overweight, or whatever. So everyone has a certain number of calories and a certain type of meal that they're supposed to have. So they get in their tray and they have a meal. So there's somebody that I was working with who felt hungry a lot. He said he wanted to lose weight, but he was always really hungry and he was always trading food with people or going to the cart to try to get extra food. Like maybe someone brought back a tray and didn't finish their food. So he would go to their tray and take extra food. And then the staff would, quote unquote, yell at him for doing that. And he was so distressed about the staff yelling at him that it created a lot of anxiety. And a lot of times in response, he ended up engaging in self-harm behaviors. So we were working on that, and we had to zoom out and look at the bigger context. Okay, the bigger context is you have a doctor and a dietitian that prescribe meals for you. The ward staff was told all the patients have to have their meals. They're not allowed to have extra food. People are on top of the ward staff telling them, you have to follow this rule or you're going to get in trouble. You have to tell the patients you could only have what's on your tray. So when staff are doing that, it's not personal. He thought it was personal. He said to me, you know, they probably want me to be hungry. They probably don't like me. But it really wasn't about that at all. It actually, when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, they're just doing their job. It has nothing to do with how they feel about you. In fact, I think they really like you, but they have to do their job and tell you, you can't have this extra stuff. So as he starts to realize that, it's like, okay, maybe I don't have to be as anxious about it. Maybe I could cope with it in a different way. And plus, he also had to remember, you know what? I kind of want to lose weight too. That's another part of the context. He's hungry, but he also wants to lose weight. So in the long run, not having that extra tray is actually going to be in line with his goals. Okay, so it kind of moderates you when you think about these extra things rather than just saying, you know, this is targeted at me and the staff don't like me and they want me to be hungry. All right. Okay, so more about the middle C's. This is my personal edition. That's not in the textbook or the workbook, whatever you want to call it, but some other C's that help us to get to the middle. So being calm, clear, and centered helps a lot as well. So if we do things that kind of regulate our emotions, maybe a different coping skill to calm us down, it's easier to think more clearly and kind of be centered in the middle of what we should choose. Another thing is to be curious, considering, and creative, because we might need a creative, different way of seeing the situation to pick that middle ground response, which could be new to us. If we're not creative, we're going to the old habitual response. But if we are creative, we're exploring something, oh, that's something new. Having a conversation with somebody, so getting ideas from other people, bouncing ideas off each other, could help us get to the middle. Cooperating, collaborating, and compromising, especially if the conflict has to do with another person. So maybe if we talk it out and we come to something that's a good compromise between us, something that could be satisfactory to both parties, that helps us get to the middle rather than I think this and you think that, brings us together. And finally, compassionate and caring. And I like that graphic because it looks like the typical dialectical kind of scale that they often draw. So when we validate other people, we try to understand their point of view, we have a caring attitude toward them, it kind of helps us to connect and come to the middle. If we see the other person as our opponent or as an enemy, we stay much more polarized. So compromising, compassion toward others, caring about who they are and what their needs are, great for the middle ground. Okay, so here's the whole thing all together. All right, take your screenshot, everybody. So being mindful of black and white thinking or behavior or emotions or interpersonal. Once you're mindful of black and white, identifying the shades of gray. Remember not to get stuck, allowing some of the shifts. Remember that you could live a life with options when you have more than the extreme choices, and extremes rarely work, only sometimes. So it helps to motivate us to stay in the middle and bring context to conflict to create change. And remember some of the other C's that help us stay in the middle as well. Okay, so just to share, so here are some resources. So the Expanded Dialectical Behavior Therapy Skills Training Manual is what I was referring to. So again, it has some of the original DBT skills in there, plus some extras. And it's also a good workbook you could use on your own if you like to fill out worksheets and things like that. So could be worth checking out if you're interested. I also have 2 other videos on my channel about dialectics. So to expand more of your knowledge base about dialectics, you could check out these 2 videos. One's just an introduction and kind of explaining what dialectics are. And the other one gives a series of common dialectic examples. Okay, so we made it. So thanks for watching today, and I'll see you soon with some more DBT Expanded Edition videos. All right. Take care, you guys.